Since Marvel Rivals was first announced, it has frequently been compared to Overwatch, with many touting it as the game that will finally surpass it as the next big team-based PvP shooter. There have been many games in the past that have tried to dominate this genre, first made popular by TF2 and then Overwatch, combining elements of MOBA and FPS, but none have really come close to matching the popularity or success of these games. Over the past couple of days, I've had the chance to play Marvel Rivals quite extensively, so I thought it would be interesting to collate my thoughts and compare the two games in some key areas and see if Marvel Rivals really has the potential to surpass Overwatch. Bear in mind, however, that Marvel Rivals is only in alpha testing at the moment, so it's still quite early in development. As a disclaimer, I have not signed any agreements or NDAs, so these opinions are purely my own. I know there's been controversy recently with Marvel Rivals where creators were signing agreements with non-disparage clauses, meaning they aren't allowed to say anything negative about the game, but I haven't had to sign anything as I got my code through the in-game event. The team have also issued a statement saying they will amend these clauses under their creator program in response to the backlash, so I just wanted to clarify that before we begin. Let's start with the visuals and aesthetics of Marvel Rivals. The game showcases cel-shaded graphics that looks very stylish but also reflects the comic book origins of its source material very well. The menu screen, UI, and animations have lots of flair and are streamlined in a way that doesn't come off too flashy or over the top. Maps are beautifully designed with iconic settings and references that we are familiar with from Marvel lore, with little Easter eggs and details scattered throughout the locations. I also love that a lot of the environments are breakable, and it makes the game feel more immersive by adding extra oomph to the feel of abilities. For me personally, I do still prefer Overwatch's cleaner visuals and pixel-like style, as it just feels more polished and has less clutter, which I'll get into more later. However, I'm still very impressed by how Marvel Rivals looks so far. In terms of sound design, I was a little disappointed. Unlike Overwatch, where abilities and gunshots sound impactful and have weight behind them, Marvel Rivals sounds much more flat, akin to a mobile game. I enjoyed the interactions between the characters, sure, but the inconsistency in how abilities sounded was noticeable and detracted from my overall experience. Hopefully this is something they can improve before launch. Now, as a casual Marvel fan, the starting roster of heroes is impressive, with 19 of its most iconic characters divided into 3 roles of Vanguard, Duelist, and Strategist. These roles largely mirror the tank, DPS, and support roles in Overwatch, and unsurprisingly, it works well. Currently, there is no role lock, but it feels like the optimal team comp still requires 2 tanks, 2 DPS, and 2 supports. For the most part, the characters' designs are on point and reflect their comic book origins very well. The game is played in third person, which initially I was skeptical about, but turned out to really enjoy because I could actually see my character in their element doing cool superhero or supervillain things. This also makes Marvel Rivals feel more MOBA-like than Overwatch, which leans more heavily into the first-person shooter aspect. Abilities are generally unique and tie in well with the character's respective powers and capabilities, although we've seen many similar mechanics in Overwatch, and there are a few overlaps with multiple characters being able to fly, float, or provide buffs such as speed and damage boosts. Ultimates are insanely impactful and overpowered, with some being able to insta-kill if an enemy is caught in it. This is good in the sense that they feel like huge moments where you can single-handedly change the tide of a fight, but also frustrating because there aren't many counterplay options. Ultimates in Overwatch, on the other hand, generally have more counterplay and feel more balanced. But this isn't the biggest issue I have with the abilities in Marvel Rivals. My main concern is just how chaotic and messy it can get during teamfights. If you thought Overwatch was chaotic, Marvel Rivals is that but amplified tenfold. Not only is Marvel Rivals 6v6 instead of 5v5, there are so many more abilities, attacks, and spam that it oftentimes turns into crazy visual clutter. Sure, it can be chaotic fun, but it's also slightly headache-inducing when fights become WTF because of the sheer amount of things happening. It reminds me of the first time I played Paladins, where there was so much going on that it was hard to tell precisely who was using what. Maybe it's because Marvel Rivals is still new, but Overwatch feels much more organized, which is ironic to say because people already criticized the visual clutter in that game. I also struggled to memorize all of the abilities of some of the characters in Marvel Rivals and can't imagine how difficult it's going to be porting these over to console for controller users. This leads me to the gameplay and the potential for Marvel Rivals to be a highly competitive esports title. For now, the available game modes of Convoy, Domination, and Convergence are nothing revolutionary that we haven't seen before, mirroring the Escort, King of the Hill, and Hybrid modes in Overwatch. They work well though and are decently fun despite not being very creative, so hopefully they introduce new modes that give the game a more distinct identity. I'd also like to add that since Overwatch has been out for years and has had time to improve and tighten the mechanics of these core game modes, Marvel Rivals understandably feels less refined in execution. For example, ultimate charge carries over to the next round in the domination mode, which seems like an odd design choice given how insanely impactful they are in this game. Having an ult available to use at the start of a round basically means your team already has an instant advantage. Marvel Rivals does have a competitive mode available to play, and I've already run into some interesting individuals despite it being just an alpha playtest. Am I surprised? Of course not. What's more surprising though is that I've seen more people trying to communicate and make callouts than in my Overwatch ranked games where it's radio silent most of the time. Unfortunately, however, due to the visual clutter, large amount of abilities per character, and lack of role queue, the game feels like a mixture of paladins and early Overwatch and lacks the balance or structure required for a truly competitive ranked system, at least for now. Perhaps this will change, but one of the fundamental reasons Overwatch introduced role queue was to address the problem of imbalanced role picks, and I'm expecting Marvel Rivals to eventually introduce this as well. There are also rumors that the game is planning to add many more characters upon release, which means a lot more abilities and even team-up abilities. This sounds like a balancing nightmare, and if competitive Overwatch is anything to go by, I'm really not expecting Marvel Rivals to be the next big esports title. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just means the game might appeal more towards a casual player base who don't care too much about balance, potential issues, and simply want a chaotic fun time playing their favorite Marvel characters. I've definitely had a blast so far playing this game, but I'm just worried that it may be the novelty of it being new, similar to early Overwatch, and that this novelty will wear off if the more pertinent issues are not addressed. The last thing I want to talk about is Marvel Rivals' monetization system. The publisher is NetEase, which doesn't have the greatest reputation when it comes to this. However, the in-game battle pass and shop system doesn't seem too outrageous, and it was actually pretty easy to collect units through leveling up the battle pass and completing missions to buy skins. I don't know if they plan to add new currencies in the future, but I sincerely hope they don't become too greedy with the monetization and make new characters free for everyone. We saw how locking heroes in the battle pass worked out for Overwatch, and well, it just didn't. All in all, Marvel Rivals is a very fun game, and I was actually really impressed with what I saw in the alpha test. Is it an Overwatch clone? Not really, because it plays quite differently and is much more similar to a third-person Paladins, although there are many elements that appear to be borrowed or at least inspired by a game like Overwatch. Is it an Overwatch competitor? It's too early to tell, but so far, I think it has a few glaring issues that need to be addressed before it can truly be considered on the same level. I definitely see potential for this game to be popular, and I'm excited to see what the developers change or add over the next few months, and whether they will take on board a lot of the feedback shared by the community. It's probably not a game that replaces Overwatch completely for me, but it could be something I play and get invested in alongside it. Those are my initial and honest thoughts about Marvel Rivals and how it compares to Overwatch, and hopefully you guys found it helpful. Let me know what you agree or disagree with in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.